Prologues are weirdly controversial in the writing and publishing world. There's a maybe misconception that editors hate prologues. I don't think that's entirely true. In fact, I know it's not, because I can name, and I'm sure you can name, several amazing award-winning best-selling books that have fantastic prologues. In fact, an editor once requested that I add a prologue to one of my books. If I can be blunt about it, editors only hate prologues that suck. Okay, but when does a prologue suck? How do you know if your book even needs a prologue? That's what we're talking about in today's Writing Workshop Wednesday. First off, I want to talk about the risks of writing a prologue. Literary agents and editors receive hundreds of submissions a week. When they crack open a brand new manuscript, the first thing they're looking for is to feel a connection to the story. And more often than not, that means feeling a connection to a character as soon as possible in the opening pages. Now, I can hear someone out there wailing about gatekeepers and whatnot, but look, that connection, that's what readers are looking for too. When you browse the shelves at a bookstore or flip through opening pages on Amazon, you're looking for a connection. And if you don't feel it, you're not gonna buy. It's the same with agents and editors. The sooner we care, the sooner we feel invested, the better your chances of selling this story. So the risk of starting with a prologue is that you could be delaying that connection by 1 page or 2 pages or 10 pages or however long it takes before chapter 1 starts and we meet the main character. Of course, some prologues feature the main character, but we're gonna get into all that in just a second. Let's start with this. What makes a bad prologue? I'm gonna say it comes down to intent. Let's look at a few examples. 1, the intent is to give the reader a ton of backstory or world building before the story starts, so the reader has context. Why is this bad? Because the prologue is usually just a bunch of heavy exposition and the reader has a lot of interesting information, but nothing to connect with or care about. Number 2, the intent is to create a feeling of suspense by flashing forward to a climactic scene near the end of the book before jumping back to chapter 1. This prologue doesn't work because it kind of feels like a cheap tease, and again, the reader doesn't have any context for why this climactic event is so climactic, so no matter how exciting and action-packed it is, they have nothing to connect with or care about. The third one is sort of similar to number 2. It's starting off with a prologue that's action-packed. Maybe it's something that's happening to someone else who isn't the main character. Maybe it's something later in the book. Maybe it's something that happened years before the story started. But really, the real intent here is to start off with action because chapter 1 is just another boring old day in the life of the protagonist. This prologue doesn't work because the reader doesn't know the characters in the action-packed scene. So no matter how many explosions there are or how many shots fired or swords drawn, the reader has nothing to connect with or care about. Are you seeing a pattern here? It's all about connection. Now, I have to confess something. I kind of lied earlier. This isn't actually about intent. It's really just a matter of writing ability. If you're a skilled enough writer, you can get readers to connect with and care about any of these types of prologues. Here, I'll prove it. Let's start with the backstory world building dump prologue, and we'll look at The Diviners by Libba Bray. On the surface of it, the prologue to this book breaks all the rules. It's an omniscient narrator, the main characters don't make an appearance at all. Instead, we get a handful of characters, most of whom don't have names, and we're never going to see them again. A haughty young socialite pulls out a Ouija board to impress her friends, and they unwittingly conjure a demonic spirit that will be the antagonist of this novel, Naughty John. He's released into Manhattan and settles into this old dilapidated house and begins to make his plans. And that's why this prologue works, because not only is it truly beautifully written and really does a wonderful job of setting the scene, while we're never going to see most of these characters again, we've met our antagonist. It's all deliciously creepy and ominous, and now we're going to go into chapter 1 with a good taste of the type of horrors that await our protagonists. Second, let's look at that flash forward prologue, and let's look at You by Charles Benoit. The super short prologue to this book is pretty much word for word from the climactic scene of the novel. The entire book is written in second person, and the prologue begins, "You're surprised at all the blood." There is one other character present, We don't know his name yet. In the prologue, he's just he. He is also surprised at the blood. Who is he? Whose blood is it? Who has done what to who? That's the mystery here. This prologue works because it's sparsely written, it's super short. The reader just gets a little flash of this horrific event in the protagonist's future before starting the story, and we have questions we want answered, and that's going to keep us turning the pages. Now, the action-packed prologue. Let's look at The Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown, or really any book by Dan Brown. In The Da Vinci Code, a museum curator is shot by an unnamed assailant over a mysterious secret. In the mystery thriller genre, it's not uncommon for the book to start out with a body, and in this case, the prologue functions as a brief scene from the point of view of this victim, along with plenty of tantalizing hints about the secret that he died for. So here it is. Why do all of these prologues work? They are all scenes. They aren't exposition, they aren't descriptions of a fantasy world or some long ago battle or anything that reads like a textbook. Each one has an inciting incident, a climax, and a denouement. Each one has characters who, in one way or another, are very relevant and crucial to the rest of the story. And if you were to read on in any of these books, you'd know that the prologue wasn't completely necessary for the reader to have context to start the story. The prologues just enhanced and deepened the reading experience. And as one final example, I mentioned earlier that I was asked to add a prologue by an editor once, and that was to my novel Spell and Spindle. This was actually during the second round of revisions, so we were getting pretty close to finished. And the intent behind my editor's request fell under the world building category. Spell and Spindle is sort of a dark fairy tale, and a big part of the first pass of my revisions was to really explain and clarify more about how the magic system in the story worked and dig a little bit more into the mythology that I had created. The prologue I came up with was a legend, a fable about marionettes that steal children's souls that the main characters of the book reference constantly. As with the previous examples I mentioned, this wasn't exposition, it was a scene with an inciting incident, a climax, and a denouement. So for today's writing workshop activity, I actually am not asking you to write anything. I just want to have a discussion about prologues. What are your favorite prologues? Why do you think they were effective? And how did they enhance the reading experience and help you feel connected with the story from the opening pages? Also, feel free to tell me about the worst prologues you've ever read. Name names, drop titles, I want to hear about it. And hey, next week's Writing Workshop Wednesday is going to be about shifting points of view, whether it's from the prologue to chapter 1 or from one chapter to the next. It's inspired by this comment from Alice on a previous video. So if you haven't already, please make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you know when that video goes up. And if you have any questions about writing in different POVs or anything that has to do with points of view, leave it in the comments below and I'll try to address them in that video as well. While we're on that subject, if you have any requests for any kind of writing workshop video, any writing craft topic you'd like to see me cover, go ahead and drop that in the comments as well. I'm keeping a running list. That's it for today. If you found this video helpful, please don't forget to hit that like button. And until next time, keep writing.